You may notice these in the background and just know that's because I sprained an ankle. That and more things in this video here. Woohoo! As per the title, how I introduced 20 people to Pathfinder. And to start this, I need to say that I moved to start going to UC Davis, and there are a lot of people that are into tabletop games here that haven't necessarily tried Pathfinder. So, naturally, I sought to correct that. And that started at first by me going to orientation and hearing a bunch of people talk about D&D because it's just a big thing here. So, I just kind of talked about Pathfinder, and I found out that one of them actually did try Pathfinder and really enjoyed summoning in specific. I'm going to have my little eye icon go on the top right of what types of things summon builds like to do, but just really liked how they were able to play a necromancer without invalidating the other characters at the table and still feel like a necromancer summoning the undead. Like, that's a big deal for people. And I was more working on my pitch of how to get more people in a Pathfinder game. And so what I started doing is I found gaming groups like ones for Magic the Gathering and other things, and just started carrying a beginner box around. And just kind of saying, hey, maybe we can find time to play that. And eventually, even before any club meetings happened, I got a game of the beginner box already going because I was just actively putting myself out there to try and find people to play with. And I think that is the most important first step if you are trying to introduce a game to people is find people that are willing to listen to what you want to hear. Now, if you want to get your friends into the game, that advice is not necessarily as helpful because you already have the people that you want to introduce something to. But you need to make sure that you are getting an audience that is at least mildly interested in what you are selling, effectively. So, with that, my first beginner box experience. And so for that group, I had 3 total people. One of which who had not played tabletop role-playing game before, one of which who had played a lot of D&D 5e, and another who played very early editions of D&D, but then didn't really keep up with it. So, 3 players at the table, all with very different gaming experiences, different expectations, etc., etc. But we're able to come together and have a good time. And I think the secret to that was really meeting everybody at where they wanted to go. So like for the brand new player, we all kind of had an agreement that we would stop and explain things and take breaks as needed. For the 5e player, I put enough things that made them want to go deeper in that they did. They did go deeper in. And the old school player just enjoyed being in a dungeon crawl. And how a lot of that group dynamic went is the 5e player and the old school player were just arguing at each other back and forth. And going, I don't want to go in there because that's obviously stupid and dangerous. I want to go in there because it's obviously stupid and dangerous, and that's basically the argument. And then the brand new player, I just kind of like turn to the side and say, but what do you want to do? To which the answer is, of course, I'm not sure, because that's kind of the theme. But I also picked up some of their like overall habits, as it were. And the brand new player was very, very scared of getting to melee with things, even when it would be safe or advantageous to do so, because it's new and it's scary. So it makes the player feel safer to just be further away with a bow. So as such, I was then thinking, okay, so when I start running the beginner box for more people, if there is another player like that who is shy, giving them a potent archer or something so that way they could have fun doing what makes them feel comfortable is likely a good idea. And so, with Dragon Club, the big tabletop role-playing game, or just tabletop gaming as a whole, club here at UC Davis, had its meeting, like, that week. And so I made a ranger that used a bow and just put it in the box. And I specifically made a precision ranger, so that way they could have that very powerful attack and then go, now I have other things that I can do. And, well, that worked really well. But before I get to how it worked, I need to go on to Dragon Club. The big thing to know about Dragon Club is that its new members night is a big event with a lot of people there, and they never have enough game masters. However, I was still worried that I would not fully fill the table because there were 10 D&D games that were open looking for players and my one Pathfinder thing. as well as a couple other systems, but it was dominated by 10 listings for D&D, my Pathfinder thing, and 2 other games. And that was the, culture that I was really walking into, was very heavily focused on D&D. Of course, what would you expect from a club called Dragon? So, naturally, I got some people ahead time that were down to play the game, so I knew that it would at least run. I would at least be able to play the game. And I was thinking, I am ready to teach 5 brand new players the game. I have 5 sheets with me because I had that Ranger plus the 4 pre-gens in the beginner box, and I could just go with that. I ended up running for 6 because one player was fine with making a Path Builder pre-generated character on their phone. Completely cool. And we just kind of started going. Now, at that point, I did introduce the X card and all the other safety tools, because when you are running a larger public game, it is very important to have a safety tool on hand, because not everybody will be comfortable with the tabletop gaming nature as a whole, and some people may cross boundaries in ways that are hard for people to verbalize, particularly if they're shy or other things. So it's very important to have those safety valves there, so that way, if an uncomfortable situation arises, people can deal with it. However, it was not needed to be used. Everybody was great. We had a great time. But I really started to see some of the flaws in the beginner box at the tail end of that first grouping and at the start of the second, because I wasn't exactly using it as directed. At the end of the first people, I had an issue with, because there wasn't a whole lot of story justification for things like why the undead are in this crypt, the old school player was kind of miffed by that, because the story of the dungeon is like the whole reason to go exploring in them. But the 5e players is kind of like, it's a pre-made dungeon. This is kind of what you expect from a tutorial dungeon. And I think that it would be great if the next iteration of Beginner Box had a coherent story that players could latch onto. And then the issue that I had with the large group of 6 players is, 1, they only gave me 4 rats. So I had to improvise and use a boar instead of 2 rats. Which, not exactly equivalent in XP, but I thought it'd be fun. So I threw in a boar. And the other major issue was, that map is incredibly claustrophobic with that many bodies in it. A lot of the Paizo adventures are known for mildly claustrophobic maps, but you really feel it when you are playing above the expected number of players. And as I was doing this teaching thing there, and I was already turning people away, I was kind of struggling through, trying to figure out how I can actually make fights dynamic in these corridors that are so tight. And I think I succeeded, mostly because I was having rats try to run around people, show off flanking in that way, and all the different things. And the boar was actually a dangerous thing for everybody to look at the initiative or go, okay, when's the boar going? So they got the dynamics of the fight pretty well, and they were all really having fun and hooked. And then I offered them a choice. Now, offering people a choice is a very powerful tool to do as a GM. And this choice was on how they wanted to continue, because we only had a given amount of time to play this, and I wasn't going to keep on running the beginner box for more and more sessions, because I wanted to start on my homebrew campaign. And so, what I did is I said, okay, we can either keep on going as normal, have it introduce difficult terrain, poisons, etc., or I can introduce the mechanics related to undead, because the game that I'm going to run will likely heavily involve undead. Unanimously, the party voted to go to the undead area. So, with that, I just pulled out some of the monsters from the beginner box, a couple skeletons, a zombie, and boom! A skeleton minotaur right there in the middle. Level 3 creature with a few special abilities and just big numbers. And that was their first experience with the real Pathfinder boss fight, and it was a nail-biter. People were making difficult decisions all the time. The fighter was trying to trip people while still being on the ground, because if you can deny the boss's actions, and everybody kind of saw what was happening. We're having to position different ways, trying to avoid getting cleaved by the giant guy, because he can hit 2 adjacent people with full accuracy. Really nasty stuff that those stat blocks can do. And they're just kind of learning through this. 3-action heal comes through, picks some people up. And there's a big fight of trying to make sure everybody stays alive at this, trying to control the thing, get the boss down, and it was a great time. Everybody had a blast. But one of the newer players was like, is that how every fight's gonna go? And I said, no, that's mostly just boss fight thing. It's particularly bad at the low levels. They're like, oh, okay. And yeah, it went great. Everything went great, honestly. Way better than I expected. So, yeah. And then I said, okay, everybody, let's come over and let's make characters, do a session 0. We did. Bunch of characters were made. Boom. And it was all working and doing well. And you remember how I mentioned I had one player that built character on Path Builder on his phone? Well, then he decided to go for week B because I couldn't do a scheduling thing and blah, 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 blah. You know how these things go if you're in tabletop role-playing game space. Scheduling is hell. And what he ended up doing is, for the first time, stepping into the GM chair and ran a game for like 8 or 9 players. Just absurd player number. And I made some like basic pre-gen NPC sheets that are even easier than like the beginner box pre-gens. They're just based off of classes. So like there'd be a fighter like one that would have sudden charge and attack of opportunity. Or, as the remaster calls it, reactive strike. That was what the remaster called it. But all that stuff was just kind of in there as pre-generated characters, and people could just pick one up and then play it. And I rated them by difficulty and all that stuff, so that way people could explore different themes. I was later asked, why didn't you put in a rogue? Which, 1, oops. 2, I thought that it might be frustrating for a party with a lack of team synergy or coordination to try and get sneak attack active. So I just kind of focused on making the ranger cool and do roguey-like things. It was a choice. Oops. But that was the only complaint I really heard about that session. So, yeah. And I've since run that homebrew game, had no issues. Some new players came in, tossed them on the pre-gens. They work just fine along with, like, normally built characters. Everything's going really well. And the beginner box really helped that on-ramping process because it made it so that I didn't need to really worry about that first adventure. I had colorful map. I had some character sheets I could hand out. It made a lot of that onboarding process a lot easier. And it also acted as like a marking of, this is a thing that I want to do. So, yeah. I highly recommend getting the beginner box if you want to learn the game. Some of the rules in there are going to be a little bit different due to remaster, but when the remaster is available, all those rule changes will be published online, like sites like Archives and Nethys and Path Builder. And if you want to get involved and you happen to be in the area around Davis, you can just come to Dragon Club as a drop-in. It's open to the community, so not just students. So, yeah, that's all I have for you today. I'm also going to be remaking my video on what classes are best for new players in a post-remaster Player Core 1 world, because, well, I have a lot of new players that are asking that question of me, so I might as well update my thoughts and publish a new video. But they'll need to wait until after the remaster's fully out. So with that, I'm going to say bye to you all, and have a good one.